Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm here with Greg and Tracy Welch from Step by Step 3D. They are in Las Vegas, Nevada. And like we said last time we chatted on here, we just want to build a bigger community for us, for MSPs and just 3D industry professionals in general. So there's a need for us to link arms and talk about the industry and help the industry grow together, and know that there's other people out there that have similar type businesses, or that are kind of doing going through the same challenges or finding the same thing. So we think at Open House there's a lot that we can learn from each other, and so that's why we invited Greg and Tracy Welch to come on and tell us about Step by Step 3D and just kind of how they got into the industry in general. So Greg and Tracy, would you mind just kind of introducing yourself and Step by Step 3D for us?
All right. Do you want to, or would you like me to?
Okay.
All right. Well, yeah, we've been in since with Matterport, if you will, since beginning of 2016, somewhere in there. Um, we both come from a real estate background, and the camera was obviously kind of pointing in that direction, pun intended there, in the beginning. And so we picked it up and quickly realized that it had a business behind it, and so almost simultaneously created Step by Step 3D in addition to the real estate, and really it's pulled us away from the real estate um, as brokers to really focus on Step by Step 3D pretty much nonstop since, um, and really took it for a ride during the COVID years. Here in town, it was just nonstop. We had set up some automations and stuff like that for ordering for a lot of that. So we almost weren't taking calls. It was just nonstop. The order came in and we were running to do the work. And um, we've expanded on that with Matterport, got into the photography side of things, also got into some pulsar, so like street view mounted camera on the car, as well as BLK. We've kind of broadened the horizon there, the only thing, and drone, but really it's just all geared, I think, for the most part around the Matterport platform and
Yeah,
photography. Did I kind of cover most
I
of
think
that?
so. We enjoy the direction that the company is going and the industry is going. Again, like I said, it was first just real estate, and then we started doing a lot of businesses. We've done the Smith Center for the Performing Arts out here in the beginning, which was just a wonderful experience for us to be able to bring that to customers visiting and people who live here. But venturing into the more the business aspect of it and trying to capture places that are unique and that uh, people wouldn't be able to experience otherwise. I think that's just the most fascinating part of it, and so we just are addicted, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, addicted ourselves. Yeah,
That's
find
awesome.
ourselves
So
visiting old projects.
Yeah.
Even years ago. As we're very big on showcasing it on the site as opposed to burying it and or whatnot. And so we find ourselves, oh, you remember when we did that? Remember hiding right there? It's a big game of hide and seek.
Yeah.
But
that's so awesome. Yeah, I think we don't talk about that enough. And I think that when you get away from just the real estate use case, where usually these models can have a pretty short lifespan that they're needed, and you get more into like the business to business, the models can be pretty evergreen. And I think what we've chatted a lot with businesses is like, for one example, we did, so I'm here in Waco, Texas, and we were fortunate enough to do some projects with Magnolia, um, and some of their fixer-upper houses. And what's cool is that forever they'll now have a digital version of that house, that even for just reminiscent purposes, to be able to go back and step back inside that project that they poured their heart and soul into, um, is pretty cool just from like an archival standpoint.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, we have a builder that we work with out here, and they just do every single model that they build. We scan for them, and in the beginning, they said we want to build our library. So even if it's the same model they did across town, but it's decorated and outfitted differently or has a slightly different nook that wasn't in the other one, they scan it, and it's all for building their library so that they can see what they've done throughout the years and go back and look at them. Obviously, probably for deeper purposes than we think, but but yeah, but that's great that you were able to preserve those experiences for Magnolia.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think what we've experienced too, like with a real estate customer, it makes a lot of sense. Like this purpose of this space is so someone can preview the house without needing, to be there physically. But sometimes it's hard, I think, our experience at least, to help businesses see, the ultimate value of a 3D, digital twin. And I think sometimes like each one has such varying, benefits that they might get. How do you guys at Step by Step 3D, put real estate aside, like when you're trying to communicate to a business why they should want a digital twin, what do you do? What do you tell them? Like, what have you seen be successful?
It's hard to put to explain it to a business, when it was just so minimally tagged and,
Mhm.
and, and pop-ups were minimal. And it's also hard. We had done quite a few where we would promote, hey, this is how you can promote situations inside of it with tags, videos, whatnot. And then we'd finish and they wouldn't follow through on there. And we're like, if you give us the content, we can put it in. And so they wanted it, but it was lackluster after, they got it. They're great. They posted and we never, I'm like, we still have work to do here. And you guys are gone silent on
and
us.
and most of them just wanted the entrance into Google Street View. So take the
Mhm.
tour, put it on Google Street View where Google sees it and brings maybe more folks to their website that way. So we found some will put it on there and then wouldn't do anything with the tour. And like, there's so much more you can be doing. So it is a struggle. Sometimes it seems that either the business sees it or they don't. Um, you necessarily get it. But a lot of times, if you can let them know that there's so much more that they can do with it. And, for example, it's probably getting easier. In the past, like I said, we were just like, okay, we'll do it to put it on Google.
Yeah.
Or, just more eyes on your people who are timid or afraid to go, like dentist offices or places that we did escapology, a place where, you know, people are like, wait, what is that? And
Yeah.
what's
I
going to
don't want to
happen
get
to me in
attacked by
there?
zombies or
Yeah, I'm
whatever. Yeah.
scared to be locked in there.
Yeah.
And so while we scanned it so that we weren't giving away the actual rooms and what you could do in there, it was just entrances, short peeks into the rooms.
Well, and like the dental scenario, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
kids or whatnot, or there's just that anticipation. This allows, and a lot of the businesses would call us and say, we're just trying to
Take away the fear,
take away
take
the
away
fear
the
was the
unknown.
actual verbiage that was used a couple times. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but as she said, it's getting easier. A lot of the skins that have come out, as we call them, is really what it was. It was just giving a little more flavor to it. Super hyped about Open House, I got to tell you. I mean, and I'm sure you're glad to hear that. But I mean, we are really just pumped with what we're seeing, seeing some of the additions to it, and a lot of them on YouTube. Watching some of the stuff I've missed, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
but we see major potential with it. So
Yeah.
we're definitely
it's changing the game.
Yeah, I think you brought up lots of good points. I think the base case is like, hey, this can help with SEO, and Google's demonstrated that. I think you can read lots of different articles about how basically if you have a street view inside of Google Maps, that those listings can be preferred and they receive higher engagement. So I think that's a really good point. When someone's like trying to communicate this to a business, there might be lots of different, benefits that they might be kind of chatting about that are nice, but then it's kind of like at the very least, like this will help
Mhm.
increase your SEO presence and just your engagement through Google. And I think you brought up another really good point about just the psychological, experience that it can be to like go visit a place for a new time for the first time. I think of like going to a church building you've never been to for the first time, or going to a new school, or like a child going to the dentist. Like we can all kind of relate to that experience. Like especially if there's a group of people that will be inside that building, it's pretty daunting. And so being able to show someone or letting someone see like, hey, this is what it's going to look like when you walk through those doors, can definitely, bring down some barriers there. And add value to the business for sure.
Yeah, we used to tell folks, the more that you have to do on your website, the more that they can go and interact with and stay on there and interact with the tour. It helps with the Google juice or the
Yeah,
visitor.
yeah. The longer they're
Site.
staying on a page, that helps, and Google
Um,
sees that with the SEO.
but but the biggest thing was that unknown. I've gone to a few places and I was like, wow, I had no idea that it looked like this. I had no idea that it was like this. Well, that's pretty cool. I want to go see that. But it ends up getting on my
Well,
list.
and that's where like the increased tagging and that sort of thing that's happening with a lot of the skins and
Mhm.
including yours. And I hate to use a skin name in
No,
everybody's
that's great. I think
these
that's
days,
a good one.
but well, we're looking at yours as more of a building block to it, not just an overlay. I mean, look, I was talking with a peer the other day, and we're talking about, Matterport should really only be 25% of this experience. What you put with it, or tag it with, and what you do with it can be so much more. It can be the other 75%. So we
Yeah,
should look at Matterport as being the whole shebang. Here you go, walk away. We should look at that as just a small piece of what we're building and what we tie it to. So, but
totally
yeah,
agree. I
big
think
part of increasing that experience when they're walking through that church or that building is, you don't necessarily need to keep them in the tour too long. You can take them to so much more and bring them back to it, which has to do with a slide
yeah,
out that you guys have on the left side, which to me is a game changer. I like that being able to interact with multiple tours. You can have a dozen tours. This is a way to keep them on one page and jump them around. I know I'm
Mhm. It's a
touting
good
your,
feature.
well,
but I so,
you can sing our praises this whole time. We'll have to invite you back for sure. No,
I just
but
think about it, to be honest.
I
So
think it's because we're actually actively working on something, a project, with your two projects actually with
yeah,
your so and they're businesses. Well, one's business, one's maybe not necessarily
oh,
in the same
I see
category.
the one in the background.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's kind of at the top of our mind right now as far as
totally.
what we're trying to work
Well,
on.
and I think that raises a good point about just this a smart move that Matterport made. I think because Matterport really applies to just so many different industries, like literally anything that's built. And now even with the Pro 3, it's like you can also scan out large spaces. We're not just talking about buildings anymore. And so from manufacturing facilities to schools to real estate to just, archaeological sites, like there's just innumerable use cases that Matterport can be used for. And I think they did a great thing by opening up the SDK and the API and allowing partners like Openhaus and Treatise and others to come on and build solutions on top of those because now those specific business use cases like Matterport just doesn't have the bandwidth to be able to build solutions for literally every use case. And so people like us can work with people like you to, kind of solve some of those things for sure.
Yeah, yeah, working on their platform. If that's their focus, just nail that thing so that we, the provider, don't have issues with it on site. And some of the feature sets that have just come out recently are just
Mhm.
wonderful. But you know, they get little glitches here and there where we've got a few complaints and you get it kicked back and now it's fixed. So, I mean, it's an evolution with them too. I'm not knocking at all. I actually enjoy it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So one more question I wanted to ask about was when you look towards the future of 3D in general, what gets you excited? Because I think there's a lot of stuff happening, the eventual, broad consumer adoption of VR, the new Pro 3 camera, the whole metaverse concept. I just think there's so many different hot topics right now that relate to the 3D industry. When you just think about like the future of step-by-step 3D, and this industry in general, what has you guys optimistic or excited about it?
That's a tough one. I mean, there's you know, subscribing to so many different feeds
Hmm.
um, in so many things, from LiDAR to you know, what is it, the BLK? There was some series, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to catch all of those. I'm going to miss one. And, I'm just, in general, I like where it's going because it's something I dig into, and I'm always, that's my book at night is, what tech's coming out and what short read can I do? And I'm just, I think, excited in general for the direction that this is all going. What step by step might play a role in? It's tough, growing a business is not easy, and we're looking at growing pains. You can't grow unless you bring somebody on. You can't grow unless you have that new piece of technology. Um, where we got early on with having the BLK and then the Matterport, and we're like, okay, wait a minute, Pro 3 has to tie into this. Uh, it's, I think, consistent. We have consistent work, but it's
Yeah, yeah, and I think what we're struggling with right now is just how can we grow because we need to, because what we're seeing is that obviously 3D is here to stay, and more and more people are adopting it and utilizing it for different things,
Mhm.
um, for so many industries that it's just become when we first started, I mean, you threw around the word Matterport or 3D virtual tour, and people really didn't know what you were talking about. When we go out there now, we hear a lot more people. Oh yeah, I've seen the Matterport. I've seen
Yeah.
that. I've seen that walkthrough thing, and we're getting fewer. Oh my gosh, I've never heard of that. We're getting fewer of that. So it's getting more and more widespread adoption. And I think as a business, you try to figure out, okay, there's so many different avenues that you can direct your attention and focus and pathway to. There's so many different that trying to identify that road that we want to go on. We've got our hands in a lot of different pots, so we're trying to figure out how to narrow that, just to find that direction for the two of us and how we want to grow. But
Yeah, there's only so much tech you can in a smaller company utilize, and I think
Yeah.
we've kind of met that cap with, like I said, the car-mounted camera, the BLK, the Matterport, and the photography. We're like, you want me to fly light? I, So yeah, there's limitations there, but growing is no easy task.
but exciting,
Yeah.
exciting
But
that.
it's exciting, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. At the same time, we whiteboard everything
Yeah.
and snapshots and start over. What? Oh, that didn't work. Scrub it. Let's go again. Let's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
but it's
there's
things when you're kind of ho humming along, and then you get this call for this, major project, and you're like, oh my gosh, can we do this? How are we going to do this?
it's more how.
What platforms are we going to use? Yeah, what camera? What do we need to do it? And we just got done doing a large 3D project, and it was great. It was a lot of hard, tough work, but we completed it, and it's an awesome achievement. So, um, yeah. So there's a lot going on, and a lot to be excited about, I think.
Yeah,
Definitely. And I think it's probably helpful too to be in such a fast growing city. From what I understand, I think Vegas, the area in general is growing. And so I think as businesses and just homes and things grow in Vegas, it's good to be in a region that has some momentum in that
yeah.
way.
It's an
Yeah.
interesting city. I look at Vegas, and if you look at it from an aerial view, Vegas casino industry, and you compare it to a big, an LA or a Chicago, it's tiny.
Yeah.
It really is. And so your strip business, is its own beast, and then you have basically the suburb businesses, all the supplementary things that support that, and everything from a chiropractor to a liquor
Mhm.
store. They're everywhere, and so which is similar across the states. But we do have that casino industry it's a tough egg to crack, but we've
Mhm.
definitely found a few ways in and here and there, and yeah,
But
yeah,
every time we get like a new, like the Raiders coming here, and a new sports team, and we kind of think, ooh, you know,
Yes.
what can we do for them?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Who's the contact?
the list is so long of who for us to contact, and how we can be of service. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good
That's
problem.
yeah.
well, we are short on time. It flew by. We'll have to have you guys back on to chat more. I have lots of questions that we'll save for next time, especially about so my wife and I, we both also work from home. And so I would love to chat about that. We don't work together on the same business like y'all do, but I just think we could have some really interesting conversations about what works for you guys and all of that. So we'll save that for for next time. But how can people find you guys online?
It's pretty easy. Step-by-step3d.com, about as short as I could make it. On almost every social network, it's at Step by Step 3D. We were able to be lucky enough to maintain that, other than I think YouTube, but working on that. Yeah. So yeah, that would be the way.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Greg and Tracy, I appreciate the time so much, and looking forward to continued conversations.
Thank you for having
Thank you.
us.
Yeah, thank you for letting having us on and working with Open House. That's great.
Definitely good things ahead for sure.